We are now in DesjArdin's chapter 6, employee rights at work, and we are now in aspect 3, in which we are going to discuss participation rights at work and employment at will. Let's recap real fast. We're talking about employee rights at work, and we have identified 3 possible ways to think about it. 1, right to work, which just means right to work without joining a union. 2, right to a job. And 3, right to keep a job. A good way of making sense of what it means to have a right to keep a job is due process rights, meaning that one cannot be fired without a valid reason. A kind of an extension of that is participation rights at work. It's part of right to keep a job in the sense that it isn't about anyone having any, so to speak, rights prior to having a job, but it's only after one has a job that one can have due process rights at work and participation rights at work. Furthermore, we will discuss one more possible interpretation, and that is employment at will. So, participation rights at work. DesjArdin argues that the second proper interpretation of rights at work is the participation rights, in addition to the due process rights. According to these rights, the participation rights, all employees should participate in some way in the decision-making process of determining the firm's action. Employees could have a voice in the managerial meetings, or employees could have a say in how their specific jobs are to be organized, and so on. There's a range of possible ways in which the employees can participate in the decision-making at work. The foundation for the participation rights is also Kantian. The idea here is that in order to have their autonomy, rational autonomy, or freedom respected, a person must have a say in what happens to them or significantly affects them. If a person does not have any say in what is happening to them at work, person's autonomy is not being respected. Autonomy, after all, is determining the course of one's life for oneself, right? But of course, there are other players at work, other stakeholders at work, and so the right to determine what happens at work cannot belong to employees exclusively. It also belongs to shareholders, employers, and so on. But the thought here is employees also cannot be completely without this right to participate in the decision making at work, right? And just as in the due process rights, the foundation for this interpretation of workers' rights is that of rational autonomy. Respect for rational autonomy would demand that one is not fired without a valid reason, and it would also demand that one has some kind of a say in what happens at work. Finally, there's one more interpretation of what it may mean for employees to have rights that is usually spoken of, and that is employment at will. Employment at will is not strictly speaking a workers' rights model. It is the opposite of the due process. It says that an employee can be fired at any time for any reason. But even here, there are challenges. For example, courts have been known to award money to employees who have been fired just before the end of the year bonus, simply in order not to pay contractual bonuses to them, right? So we can well imagine that you are hired with some kind of a promise that there will be a bonus at the end of the year. And right before the end of the year, your employer terminates your employment. for no other reason, it would seem, than to save themselves the bonus payments, right? So even that kind of behavior under employment at will interpretation of workers' rights, which does not seem to give any rights to workers at all, has been challenged in the courts. It does not seem fair.